Hello, once again, good morning. I'm coming to you from our house here in Pocatello in our music room. And I wanted to talk to you today about folk music during the Great Depression. And here are my dogs. And hopefully they don't mess up my camera here. Anyway, so folk music during the Great Depression. And the song that we're going to talk about and you're going to hear a bit of is called Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? And this was the best known, or at least one of the best known songs that was recorded and performed during the Great Depression. So to begin with, though, we want to talk a little bit about folk music and define it. So we talked about ragtime music last time, and we talked about how the emphasis in ragtime music was really on the rhythm. And you heard how bouncy and rhythmic the Scott Joplin Solace piece was. So jazz music is the same way, emphasis on the rhythm. That's not to say that there aren't great jazz vocalists. Of course there are, people like Sarah Vaughan and Anita O'Day and others. So obviously this music does include lyrics, but ragtime really emphasized the piano and not lyrics. So ragtime clearly was a music from the folk, meaning ordinary people, not schooled or trained classical musicians, but instead ordinary people who played music, and because of industrialization and the sheet music availability, could really perform and repeat performances of the same music by whoever could play it and whoever wanted to play it. So folk music, I would say, is also a music of the people, the folk, ordinary people, not trained classical musicians. It often included instruments that were easy to make, homemade instruments sometimes, but also just instruments that were easy to carry around. So Scott Joplin was also an itinerant musician. He traveled around and played piano. But folk music more often is a music that includes guitar, banjo, instruments like that are easy to carry around. And then in the case of folk music, the emphasis is also on the lyrics here. And so we want to hear the lyrics, and often the lyrics were emphasized by the vocalist who was singing them because he or she really did want you to hear what the song had to say. So there's often a message in folk music. And there certainly is a message in Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? So what I'm going to do first is talk a little bit about the man who wrote the song, Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? And then I'm going to play the prelude of it in the next video and talk a little bit about the song's climax toward the end of the song and how it's performed. So, but before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit about the man who wrote Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? The lyricist's name is Yip Harburg. I love that name. It was actually not his given name, but it's the name that he made up for himself. The melody was written by a man named Jay Gorney. So first a little bit about Yip Harburg. He was born Isidore Hochberg in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in 1896. He was born to two Orthodox Russian Jews, and he spent his childhood in the Lower East Side. He did not grow to be a religious person. Instead, he kind of shunned organized religion anyway, and instead became very interested in liberal politics and liberal, even socialist ideas. He was very much in favor of racial equality and gender equality, and he became a supporter of unions and of labor politics in this time period. So you might hear some similarities between Yip Harburg and Anzia Yezierska, who wrote the book Bread Givers that you read for the course, because these two people were at least influenced or grew up as in an Orthodox Jewish household, were both Russian or children of Russian immigrants, and lived in this very important milieu of the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where a lot of theater, comedy, music was performed and produced. So that's where Harburg grew up. He went to college in Manhattan, a place called City College of New York, and he then married and had 2 children. He became a co-owner of a company called Consolidated Electric Appliance. So he didn't start out as a musician per se, but following the stock market crash of 1929 that you've heard about already in the course, he lost his shirt in his business, and he then began to focus on writing songs for a living. He was encouraged in this by a man named Ira Gershwin, who's was better known than Yip Harburg in the music world, especially the Broadway musical world. So that friendship lasted their whole lives, and Gershwin was a big influence on Harburg and his decision to then turn to music for his livelihood. He then met Jay Gorney, whose real name was Abraham Jacob Gornetsky. Hello, here's my dog again. Who changed his name to Jay Gorney. So you can hear how both men seemingly tried to obscure their Jewish or their Russian Yiddish backgrounds. So Harburg's parents spoke Yiddish at home, and Yiddish is kind of a weird combination of Hebrew and German and Russian language. So it's a very, very unique immigrant language that's unique to the United States, and especially in this time period. So Abraham Jacob Gornetsky, or Jay Gorney, wrote the melody of Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? And he supposedly heard this melody when he was a little boy. He was actually born in Russia. And he said that it was a lullaby that he recalled from his days when he was still in Russia. So these 2 men wrote Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime? Harburg then went on to become even more famous through his song Over the Rainbow, and actually all the songs in Wizard of Oz. So if you've ever seen that movie, which was produced in the 1930s during the Great Depression, you know even more about Yip Harburg, even perhaps if you don't know the name. So Over the Rainbow became even more famous through Judy Garland's performance of it, and in some degree was also an aspect of the Great Depression. If you think about the lyrics to Over the Rainbow, they also speak about longing for a better day. And so the Great Depression really caused this outpouring of culture, musical culture, art, literature. Think of John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Whenever something really bad happens in human history, it's usually accompanied by this great outpouring of music and literature, because humans' ability to live through a disaster often inspires them to write music and literature and make art. And so this is a time period in which folk music becomes really important in helping people through the Great Depression. So I guess the question I'm trying to ask here is to try to get you to think of why folk music became so important during the Great Depression. And you might also think of it as the Depression as a time when the documentary film becomes important. People knew that they were living through something really definitive and really important in their own lives as individuals, but also that the United States as a whole was living through a very important time culturally and historically, and so people wanted to document that. In a way, Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime is also a documentary. It's documenting the history of the United States and what people found, the disillusionment that people felt when they felt like they had helped to build a nation, and now the nation was in tatters, and they themselves were struggling through hard times. And so the lyrics of Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime definitely portray this sense of great disillusionment, disappointment, and uncertainty as to where the country and where individuals were going, what was happening to this great American life that they had helped build and that now was in tatters around them. So in the next video, I'll play some of the music to Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime, and then we'll talk a little bit about how the song was constructed.